October 1942, Station 105, Chelston Airfield, England. Inside a crowded surgical tent, Colonel Malcolm Cummings Grow leaned over another wounded airman. The young navigator's chest had been ripped open by fragments of German flak. Grow's steady hands worked carefully to remove the jagged metal pieces that had sliced through leather and flesh alike. He had seen this same kind of wound dozens of times over the past few weeks. The fragments were slow-moving, debris that had already lost much of its speed before tearing into human bodies. As he operated, another B-17's engines rumbled outside, coughing as the plane limped home from another daylight bombing raid over Nazi Germany. Ambulances were already lining up. Nearly 70% of the men passing through Grow's field hospital had the same kind of injuries. Low-velocity shrapnel wounds caused by exploding flak shells and bits of aircraft blown loose mid-flight. The young navigator would live. Many others that day would not. Stepping away from the table, Colonel Grow made a decision that would change the future of aerial warfare. These wounds were preventable, and the technology to prevent them already existed. Someone just needed to ask the right question. Within months, that question would save thousands of lives. The story had begun that summer. On August 17, 1942, the U.S. 97th Bomb Group launched the first American heavy bomber mission of the war. 18 B-17 Flying Fortresses crossed the English Channel to strike railway yards in Rouen, France. Major Paul Tibbets led the formation. The mission met only light resistance, but it gave a false sense of security. As the 8th Air Force pushed deeper into German-occupied Europe through the fall and winter, casualty numbers told a grim truth. Daylight precision bombing was far deadlier than expected. By October 1942, the Air Force's first full medical analysis of combat casualties revealed something surprising. Most injuries didn't come from German fighters or machine gun fire. About 70% of all bomber crew wounds were caused by low-velocity fragments, not bullets from Focke-Wulfs or Messerschmitts, but shrapnel from exploding anti-aircraft shells and torn aircraft parts. The Germans had perfected their anti-aircraft weapons, called Flugabwehrkanonen or Flak. These guns could fire shells over 30,000 feet high, each fitted with a timed fuse to explode near American bombers. The blast turned every shell into hundreds of razor-sharp fragments traveling at deadly speeds. Grow immediately saw the medical implications. The October analysis showed that torso injuries were the main killers. Chest wounds made up 36% of fatalities, while abdominal wounds added another 39%. That meant 3/4 of all deaths came from hits to the body's core. The math was simple: protect the torso and you save lives. But the solution wasn't. The U.S. Army Air Forces had no body armor program. Earlier attempts with steel vests for infantry had failed. They were too heavy for soldiers who needed to move fast. Yet airmen faced a different reality. They already wore heavy gear and operated in tight spaces where mobility didn't matter as much as survival. Most of the projectiles hitting them weren't fast-moving bullets but slower, tumbling fragments. Grow's medical background gave him an edge. He understood wound ballistics. A flak fragment that had traveled hundreds of yards had already lost much of its speed. A relatively thin steel plate could stop it. The same went for metal shards from damaged aircraft. So in October 1942, Grow sent a proposal to 8th Air Force headquarters. He suggested developing a lightweight armor vest using overlapping steel plates sewn into fabric, inspired by medieval brigandine armor that balanced flexibility and protection. The response from leadership was skeptical. Weight was a big concern. Airmen already carried 40 pounds of gear: parachutes, oxygen systems, flying suits. Adding armor seemed impractical. There were doubts about cost, production, and whether crews would actually wear it. Some argued that better fighter escorts would do more good than armor. Grow didn't give up. He proposed a simple test: produce a few vests, issue them to bomber crews, and track casualty rates against unarmored crews. Headquarters finally agreed, and with one condition: the armor had to be designed and built quickly, outside normal military supply channels. Grow turned to the British for help. The Royal Air Force had tried body armor before, but cramped aircraft like the Lancaster made bulky protection unworkable. American bombers, however, had a bit more space. What failed for the RAF might succeed for the U.S. The British connected Grow with the Wilkinson Sword Company, a firm famous for making swords, bayonets, and later razors. Wilkinson also had a long history with armor, even crafting bulletproof vests for officers in earlier wars. By World War II, they were producing aircraft parts, but they still had the technical skill to work with armor plating. In October 1942, Grove visited the Wilkinson facility with his sketches and medical data. Together, the surgeon and the swordmakers began an unlikely collaboration, one that would soon protect thousands of American airmen in the skies over Europe. Grove brought his deep understanding of wound ballistics and human anatomy. Wilkinson added its mastery of metalwork and production engineering. Together, they refined the design through several rounds of testing, finding the right balance between protection, weight, and flexibility. The final design had three main parts: a vest that covered the chest and back, an apron that protected the lower abdomen and groin, and an optional section that could be attached for specific crew positions, such as the ball turret gunner, who faced unique threat angles. Each section contained 2-inch square plates of manganese steel, about 1 millimeter thick. These plates overlapped slightly and were sewn into pockets inside a heavy canvas shell, lined with soft cotton for comfort. The real breakthrough was the use of manganese steel. It was hard enough to stop or deflect slower-moving fragments, but light enough to keep the vest practical. Each plate weighed only a few ounces, yet together they shielded the body's vital areas. The full vest and apron weighed around 22 pounds, heavy but acceptable when lives were at stake. To solve the problem of quick escape, the design included a red ripcord that could instantly release the armor, allowing airmen to bail out quickly if needed. By early 1943, Wilkinson Sword produced the first prototypes. Testing began in March with bomber crews wearing the British-made vests. The early results were promising. Wounded men began arriving at hospitals with armor that had stopped flak fragments. Doctors found pieces of shrapnel embedded in the steel plates but unable to penetrate them completely. The fragments had simply lost too much energy before impact, proving the armor's effectiveness. By spring, demand for the vests was exploding across 8th Air Force bases in England. But Wilkinson's factory couldn't keep up. The company was already stretched thin by other war contracts and could only produce about 100 armor suits per month, far too few for the thousands of airmen who needed them. In the summer of 1943, Colonel Grow arranged for domestic production in the United States. The War Department quickly authorized it, creating a unique partnership between the military and civilian manufacturers, including an unexpected participant, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, in New York. The museum's armor workshop, normally dedicated to restoring medieval artifacts, became a design lab for modern warfare. Specialists studied 15th century brigandine armor and adapted its overlapping plate structure to modern materials and techniques. Stephen Grandsay, curator of arms and armor at the Met, led the effort. In a 1945 article, he described how the team drew inspiration from history. The design of the M6 Flyer's armor is based on one of the museum's brigandines, dating from about 1400. The armor suits in the exhibition halls are constantly studied for suggestions, and no promising type is overlooked. Heavy jousting armor, light battle armor, mail shirts, scale armor, and quilted jackets have all been carefully examined. The partnership between medieval armor experts and modern engineers was one of the most unusual collaborations of World War II. Craftsmen, who once repaired ancient armor, were now designing equipment to save bomber crews' lives. Centuries of armor design had suddenly become relevant again in the skies over Europe. By mid-1943, American factories began producing standardized versions. The M1 vest used nylon instead of canvas for its outer shell, improving durability and water resistance, while keeping the cotton lining for comfort. The steel plates followed Wilkinson's specifications. Production scaled up fast across multiple plants. In October, the 8th Air Force officially approved armor for all bomber crews. Every crew member would receive protection suited to their role. The M1 vest weighed just over 17 pounds, lighter than the original British version due to improved materials. Pilots and co-pilots, whose seats already had armor below, received a modified M2 vest with less rear coverage. Ball turret gunners used the compact M3 apron for their tight space. Waist gunners wore the M4 apron designed for standing positions, and bombardiers and navigators received the M5 groin armor to pair with their main vests. The modular system allowed crews to adjust protection based on their exposure to enemy fire. Any initial hesitation about wearing armor vanished after its success in combat. By early 1944, the program expanded to include new gear, like the M3 helmet, designed specifically for bomber crews. Built from overlapping strips of manganese steel mounted on a leather base, it offered far better shrapnel protection than standard infantry helmets. The GROW helmet, named for its creator, could stop fragments that would have pierced ordinary designs. A comprehensive study by 8th Air Force medical officers examined 117 bomber crew casualties. The findings were remarkable. Among crews without armor, chest wounds were often fatal. With armor, fatalities from chest wounds dropped by over 90%, and abdominal wound deaths fell by more than 80%. Overall, injuries dropped by nearly 60% once armor became standard issue. The armor wasn't perfect. Head and limb wounds still caused deaths, and fragments that struck at extreme angles could sometimes slip through gaps. Larger caliber hits could still penetrate. But for the first time, bomber crews had a real defense against the most common killer, low-velocity shrapnel. On October 14, 1943, during the infamous Black Thursday raid on Schweinfurt's ball-bearing factories, 291 B-17s took off. 60 were shot down, 17 destroyed beyond repair, and 121 limped home with heavy damage. The losses were staggering, more than 20% of the attacking force. Yet doctors found that the armor had saved many lives. Crews returned with vests scarred and dented by flak that would otherwise have killed them. Body armor couldn't solve the brutal odds of daylight bombing, but it gave airmen something priceless, a fighting chance to make it home. The real turning point in bomber operations came not just from better armor, but from the arrival of long-range fighter escorts. When the P-51 Mustang entered service with enough range to accompany bombers deep into Germany, everything changed. These fighters could engage German interceptors before they ever reached the bomber formations. Combined with body armor, this new air support dramatically increased survival rates by spring 1944. By the time of the Normandy invasion in June 1944, the 8th Air Force had become a powerful and experienced force. Thousands of aircraft carried out precision strikes against French railways, bridges, and German defenses. Nearly every bomber crew was equipped with armor by this point, and production had finally caught up with demand. By the end of the war, over 338,000 M1 vests and nearly 96,000 M2 vests had been produced. What made the program so remarkable was how quickly it came together once the need was recognized. From Colonel Grough's first analysis in October 1942 to full-scale production by late 1943 took only about a year. That year covered every stage: design, prototype testing, contract approvals, manufacturing, and distribution. It was a model of efficient wartime innovation and cooperation. The effort was also a true Allied partnership. The British kicked off the project with early production through Wilkinson's sword, shared their metallurgical expertise, and even supplied 9,600 flak jackets to the U.S. under reverse Lend-Lease. American manufacturers then scaled up, using those early British designs as the foundation. The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York contributed crucial research that refined the armor's design. The partnership crossed boundaries between military, civilian, and even artistic institutions in a way rarely seen before or since. Colonel Malcolm Grough's contributions didn't stop with armor. Throughout the war, he developed improved oxygen systems that reduced altitude sickness, pioneered rest homes to help exhausted air crews recover between missions, and created psychological support programs that reduced combat fatigue. His approach treated the crew as whole human beings, addressing both physical and mental health. In July 1943, Grough received the Legion of Merit for his work on protective armor. The citation noted that roughly 70% of bomber wounds came from low-velocity projectiles, and credited him for developing lightweight body armor and helmets that saved countless lives and boosted morale. In May 1944, he received the Distinguished Service Medal for innovations including wind blast shields for gunners, electrically heated flight gear, fire-resistant protective equipment, and improved rations for long missions. His efforts reduced frostbite cases and improved flight performance. After the war, Grough became acting air surgeon for the Army Air Forces in 1945 and the official air surgeon in 1946. When the U.S. Air Force became an independent branch in 1947, the medical division remained under the Army until July 1, 1949, when Grough became the first Surgeon General of the U.S. Air Force. He retired later that year as a Major General and passed away on October 20, 1960, at the age of 72, having lived long enough to see the full impact of his work. The lessons from his World War II armor program shaped the future of personal protection. The M1952 vest used during the Korean War replaced steel plates with ballistic nylon, but kept the same modular, flexible design. In Vietnam, flak jackets improved again with new materials but followed the same core principles. Today's modern body armor, built with ceramic plates and Kevlar fibers, represents the evolution of that original idea. Colonel Grow's legacy lives on every time a soldier or police officer puts on body armor. Modern protective gear may be more advanced, but it still follows the same goal he identified in 1942, protecting the body's most vital areas from the most common threats. The story of Grow's armor isn't one of dramatic battles or last stands. It's a story of observation, science, and persistence. He studied the wounds he treated, connected them to historical ideas, worked with experts from every field, and never gave up on his solution. The evidence spoke for itself. The armor saved lives. The Flak vest program proved that effective technology doesn't need to make someone invincible. It just needs to reduce the most frequent risks to an acceptable level. The M1 Flyer's vest couldn't stop every projectile, but it didn't have to. It stopped most of them most of the time, and that made all the difference. By the end of the war, the numbers told the story. The 8th and 15th Air Forces lost more than 27,000 killed and 9,000 wounded, while the RAF's Bomber Command suffered over 55,000 killed and 18,000 wounded. Against that backdrop, any innovation that improved survival mattered. The body armor program was one of the most successful life-saving measures of the air war, cutting overall casualties by 60% and reducing fatal torso wounds by more than 77%. For the bomber crews flying through clouds of flak over Germany in 1944, survival wasn't guaranteed. But thanks to body armor, it was far more possible than it had been just 2 years earlier. Fighter escorts helped, better tactics helped, but armor saved more lives than most people ever realized. Thousands of airmen made it home because one surgeon refused to accept that their wounds were inevitable. Colonel Malcolm Grow believed those injuries could be prevented, and he worked relentlessly to prove it. Today, the Malcolm Grow Medical Center at Andrews Air Force Base bears his name, honoring the man who revolutionized aviation medicine and pioneered modern body armor. Grow's contributions reached far beyond the flak vest. He developed wind blast protection for gunners, electrically heated clothing that reduced frostbite, better oxygen systems for high-altitude missions, and mental health programs that helped combat-stressed airmen recover. Each of these innovations came from his methodical study of medical data, identifying real problems, then engineering practical solutions. In later years, the Metropolitan Museum of Art showcased the connection between medieval armor and Grow's flak vest. Exhibits displayed a 15th-century brigandine next to an M1 Flyer's vest, showing how the ancient concept of small, overlapping plates had been reborn using modern materials. Curators observed that warfare's timeless challenge, protecting the human body, had found new answers through creative use of historical knowledge. Meanwhile, the Wilkinson Sword Company returned to making razors and garden tools after the war, but proudly preserved its wartime legacy. Company histories devoted pages to their collaboration with Colonel Grow, describing how a British swordmaker helped design equipment that saved thousands of American airmen. The story of the flak vest offers lessons that still resonate today. Innovation often comes from unexpected places. A medical officer, not a weapons designer, saw the problem and proposed a fix. A sword manufacturer, not an armor factory, built the first prototypes. A fine arts museum, not a military lab, provided essential design expertise. The project succeeded because it united people from completely different backgrounds around a single goal. It also proved the power of evidence-based decision-making. Grow's proposal wasn't based on theory. It came from hard data. Testing confirmed that the armor worked. Expanding production was justified by clear casualty reductions. At every stage, facts guided the process. That disciplined, data-driven approach overcame skepticism and bureaucracy. Most importantly, the program challenged fatalism. In 1942, many believed heavy bomber missions over Germany would always be deadly, that nothing could change that. Grow refused to accept it. He argued that protection could reduce casualties, even if it couldn't eliminate them. His determination and the results that followed proved him right. From the first report in October 1942 to full implementation by late 1943, The Flak vest program became one of World War II's fastest and most successful military innovations. Its success came from clear need, smart design, strong partnerships, and leadership that understood protecting crews was key to winning the air war. In the history of military medicine, Colonel Grove's work stands as a landmark of observation, testing, and persistence. He recognized a pattern in the injuries he treated, found a practical solution, proved it worked, and didn't stop until it became standard issue. His approach still shapes how soldiers, pilots, and law enforcement officers are protected today. The principle he established remains simple and timeless. Identify the threat, design protection, balance weight with performance, test it thoroughly, and issue it widely. Before the armor, about 36% of airmen hit in the chest by fragments died. After the armor, that number dropped to 8%. Those odds didn't just save lives. They changed morale and strategy. Crews flew with more confidence, and commanders could plan missions knowing losses would be lower. This story is more than military history. It's a lasting lesson. It shows that innovation can come from anywhere, that bureaucracy can be overcome when the stakes are human lives, and that data-driven collaboration beats assumption and inertia every time. Most of all, it reminds us that one determined person can make a difference that echoes through generations. A surgeon, a swordmaker, and a museum came together to create something that transformed warfare and saved thousands of lives. Their achievement stands as proof that with careful observation, creative thinking, and unwavering persistence, even the most dangerous problems can be solved. That is the enduring legacy of Colonel Malcolm Grove's Flak vest program, a testament to how one man's data, dedication, and determination forever changed how we protect those who serve.